Hey guys, my name is Stephy Lim. I'm your instructor for ACCA Performance Management, Financial Management, as well as the Advanced Performance Management. Now, so are you preparing for your upcoming December 2020 exam? If you are, then do you face any of the problems or difficulties in preparing for it? Now, not to worry, because in my upcoming intensive revision course for ACCA APM, FM, and APM, I'll be able to walk you through on the theories as well as the computational questions. So what are you waiting for if you aim to make a pass in December 2020 exam? Stay tuned for my upcoming videos and I'll be able to show you the right way and the exam technique to make a pass. Bye for now. Thank you very much and see you real soon. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Now welcome to my ACCA Advanced Performance Management, the demo session. Now as what I've mentioned previously, we said that in this demo session, we'll be able to see two different parts of the video. The first part is to do with section A, and that's a learning phase. Section B, we'll be able to see the revision phase. Now, so what we're going to do right now is to start discussing on a small part on what is critical success factor and the key performance indicator. And that's what we know as the KPI. All right. Now, probably to some of you could probably wish to know what is this CSF and the KPI. Now, let me just probably to show you the definition and what is CSF as well as KPI. Now, in most of the ACCA APM exam questions, where the candidates will be able to see that KPI in terms of financial or non-financial will be required in order for us to look into how to match them or to apply back into the case. Now, so let us just start looking at what is this critical success factor. The first part, it says, now that's the areas in which an organization needs to perform best if it is to achieve the overall success. Now, however, I would say that this CSF is somehow quite industry specific. All right. Now, let me just quote you some example. What is this industry specific? For instance, if we talk about the private university, and that's in the education line, and what would be the best critical success factor? I'm talking about one of the best. For example, when we are talking about the teaching quality, and I believe this is something that they must perform well. But of course, the question is, students may be asking, now, how do we measure the CSF? Now, remember, the main reason why we have to measure the CSF, and that's because we want to measure the achievement of the objective. And as a result, let us see. And let's have a look at this KPI, the definition. The performance indicators that measure the most important aspects of the performance, which will be the KPI. So what will be the best performance indicators, bearing in mind, it could be the financial or non-financial. So it says, to measure how well CSFs are being achieved. And that seems to be very important. Now, so let us see the first part. Now let's have a look at the example, and I'll be able to quote you some others shortly. So it says like the private education group, the universities that we mentioned just now. So teaching quality of the instructors will then be seen as a form of the examples. And of course, not to forget, we'll be able to look into its KPI. So how do you actually measure the achievement of the CSF? So we say that's easy. So that's when we use the student pass rate in the exam. Now, so we know the higher is the pass rate and therefore this is how we achieve the CSF. All right. Now, so of course, do you get to see some other examples? Yes. Now, we do have some of the examples to do with, now, let's say for food and beverages industry. Now, what's the CSF for those running or operating a restaurant? We're talking about the food quality or the experience of the chef. But what's the KPI for these? Now, we could apply the number of awards won by the chef in preparing, all right, the menu of the restaurant. So we get to say, in a way, this is how we bring up the KPI. But which we also believe that that's the main problem or the weaknesses of the candidates in bringing in the KPI to relate back to the CSF. Now, so from where we get to see from the past exam question, all right? So we get to see that together. And let me just show you this. All right. So I've just briefed you guys on different parts of the CSF. All right. So what you have to do is bearing in mind, we believe that in the exam, the couple of ways where examiner will bring in the KPI part. Number one, the first part is when the candidates are required to propose the KPI, all right, which you don't get to see from the question. And number two, there's a possibility the existing or the current KPIs are available in the question. And subsequently, what happened? Now, we say that the candidates or the students are required in a way to evaluate the current use of the KPI and to suggest the new one. All right, so now I've actually used and applied one of the past exam questions from the ACCA APM, and this is just the extract. Now let's take a look at the scenario. We're going to go through this together and we'll see it together. All right, this is the one. Now, so it's to do with the CSF and the KPI. So imagine the CEO believes that the poor performance of the company can be addressed by ensuring that the mission statements flows down into the performance management of the business. And again, to that end, the following critical success factors and the associated current key performance indicators have been identified. Okay, so let's see. Now, most importantly, we must be able to look at there are how many CSF available in the question. So we can see there are three. Now, the first one. Now that's on greater staff productivity. And what about the current KPI in this case? Now, so we mentioned that's when they apply units produced per labor hour. So that's the first. And what about number two? Now, it says it's the reduction of the wastage in production. And again, they're here to use the power consumed per unit produced. Now, so we know that when they mention the word power, that's an example or one of cases to do with resources. And of course, number three. Now, the third is when they talk about, say, for instance, the greater innovation of products. Now, bearing in mind, when we know that this examiner loves testing something to do with innovation, so regardless of what industry it's at, now he will sometimes bring in innovation of the product or how you come up with something new, for example, new services, all right, new teams. So that's number three. And of course, here they are using the number of the new products launch. That's as the KPI. Now, so of course, what we have to do later on is we have to look at the case, all right, especially when it comes to requirement. The CEO wants you to briefly explain a weakness of the above current KPI associated with each CSF and then provide a justified alternative KPI, all right, for your information. Now, so I would say that in a way from here, we understand something, all right? So what is that? Number one. Now, we just need to know from whatever they have provided us, we have to come out with the weaknesses. And that's the first thing we have to do. All right, so individually, we just need one weakness for each of them. And as well as class number 2, is that do you think it's possible for you to go for like the justified KPI here? So any new suggestion for that? So technically that's what we have to suggest and to bring out. Okay, now, so as we know, for all the ACCA APM past exam question, now most of the time what we get to do is to look into how to write a report to the CEO, all right, which is of the company. Okay, that's to respond to instructions for the work on the following areas for this case. Now, so we know that in this scenario, we're not going to write a report, but it's just that in most of the ACCA APM exam question, the first question, all right, candidates are required to write that out. Now, remember, in order for you to actually score the 4 marks professional marks, what happened? You have to follow the report format, and on top of that, the structure, all right? So all these were then important, but of course, when it comes to our revision session, we'll be able to see how to complete the full set of the report, and that's to do with the first question. All right, so if that's the case, now let us just start looking at the requirement. Now, you can see they just want us to respond to instruction, especially to do with the current KPI. That's back to this part. And we say any suggestion for the new KPI in this case. All right, so this is something we have to take note. All right, good. Now, so as I mentioned, somehow the students are required actually to see how to prepare the answer, or I would say the structure, especially when it comes to the one with the application. So when I say the one with application, which means in a way, how do you see the preparation seem important? Now, so in order for me to illustrate here, what I'm going to do, it's by the use of the Word file, and to start with this part for your information. We're talking about the evaluation in a way, all right? Okay, now it's always important for you to know the exam technique in order for you to pass the exam, you know? Like students love writing different parts of the answer and without, say, categorizing them, and it should be in that way. Try to come out with the heading. All right, that's important. So the first thing we can do is to start referring back to the 3 different CSF. So as we know, the first one is when we talk about greater staff productivity. Can you see that? So that's the one. Okay, so what I'll be doing here is to show you the first part to do with the weaknesses, and of course we'll bring in the suggestion. All right, so we say, now, so on the greater staff productivity, they're using units produced per labor hour. So we say the current, all right, KPI, I repeat, all right, the current KPI applied is the units produced per labor hour. All right. So this is based on the question itself that we've got these. Now, so we say, however, such KPI does not reflect on the staff productivity. Can you see that? Okay. As there is no, let me say, relationship between the input and the output. Can Can you see that? So we're going to give a reason, and we say it's always important for you to bring in how these input could bring the output. And that's always seemed to be very important. So we have the first part. Now, so of course, you can start bringing in some of the suggestions. For example, we say, now alternatively, revenue generated per employee. All right, so we say revenue generated per employee could be a better measure that looks into how input could bring the output. All right, so that's the one. So when I say to bring, as in to generate the output in a way. Now, so as a result, some students even say that, hey, staff, can I go for any other KPI? Yes, of course. Now, when I say other KPI, you can even use or, we mentioned, now, actual hour worked, okay, over the total standard hours per employee could be another KPI. All right, that's it. Now, so I believe if you come up with one, that should be more than enough. All right, but it's just that, some students, they say that, hey, it's more secured for me to come out with even one more example. So right here, the first one by itself, that's correct, because we say for every single employee, we should bring in higher revenue. And of course, the second KPI right here, it's when we talk about, let's say, the labor efficiency rate. All right, so that's also another important point for us to look into. Okay, great. Now, so that's to do with the first part. And very quickly, let's see the second CSF. Now, that's more on the reduction of wastage in production. All right, so let us see here. Now, reduction of wastage in production. All right, so again, if you are seeing it, now we foresee that by the time when you look into all this reduction of the wastage in production, bearing in mind, what is it all about? Okay, now we're talking about all resources. Are you bringing in materials? So what kind of the inputs or the ingredients that you need when you run the production? So, of course, we have to check what's the current KPI. Now, that's when they use the power consumed per unit produced. So, let's see. Now, we say the current KPI is the power consumed, all right? That is per unit produced. All right, so that's the one. Now, however, this does not reflect all input or material, all right, that you get to see for the production. Can you see that? Okay, so as a result, now we are talking about the input that you use right here. So what are we going to do? Come up with something better. We're unable to look at any form of the wastage created. So we say, hence, wastage in production now would indicate any excessive stocks being produced by the business. Can you see that? So I talk about excessive stocks being produced, which means that all these stocks will still be held by the business. And as a result, what happened is remain unsold. And do you actually see this as means of wastage? Definitely. So we say, now, therefore, an alternative KPI to be applied here would be the stock obsolescence rate for the production. Can you see that? So when we talk about these stock obsolescence rate for production, again, we're talking about unable to, now we say, to be sold by the business or to meet the food demand right here, which means they have produced too much or too excessive in a way. Now, so would you see this as part of the wastage? Yes, definitely. And of course, you can bring in some other, for instance, we can even measure the input cost, okay, the input cost for the production is to the output level or the output rate. Okay, so will it be too much focus on the input? Because as we get to know that most of the time, we find that to create the value for the business, it's always to minimize the input and maximize the output. So that's what we say, by bringing the lowest level of the input and to maximize the output, or with a given level of the input to maximize the output. All right, so that's always the case. Now, so you can see this is a more complete coverage of what we have just seen here. And not to forget, it's possible for us even to move on to the next one. That's on the greater innovation of products. Okay, so greater innovation of products. All right, so you can see this. So we need to understand that what is this all about again. Okay, when we're talking about what do you mean by product innovation? Now, so we say to bring in new ideas as what you learned those days in the building block model, which we know under dimension. One of the criteria is about the innovation. All right, so this is something that we have to bring it in. So what's the current KPI right now? The number of new products launched. So we say the number of new products launched. It's one of the KPIs applied currently. All right. Now, so of course, we say, however, a better measure, all right, a better measure on product innovation could be the use of, let's say, number of patents filed per year. All right, so that will be good in a way for us to see that if you really want to know any new products coming out, this is one of it. All right. Now, so of course, we'll be able to see the alternative KPI as well. If you want to bring up additional KPI here, that's possible. Now, what you can do is the next one. Now, do you think it's important by bringing in these innovative product that can generate the revenue, all right, for the business in a way? So will that be seen as important? Yes, of course. Now, one of the good example right here that I'll be bringing in is alternatively, revenue generated from the new products over total sales ratio would be good in measuring how innovation could bring value to the business. Can you see that? All right. So I always believe that if this new innovation that can bring in additional revenue to the business, and that would be the best, right, in a way. So therefore, from here what we can see is that in the examination, now what examiner would demand or probably request us to come out with, all right? They require the students to come up with these. Now, to make things simple, number one, there must be heading, all right? So address the current issue with simple English and at the same time answering the question. So this is something what I have mentioned the other day. What did I say the other day? It's to answer what examiner wants, but not what you want. So as a result, you can see they want suggestion. I'm going to come up with that. So that's to justify alternative KPI. All right. So even the other day I mentioned and say by bringing in example would be good. And especially for those students that probably with marginal pass or fail, remember, by quoting the example, a valid and reasonable example could help you in passing the examination in a way. All right. So that's why this is what you should take note. Now, so on top of that, the difference between these as well as the F level papers is that for P level paper itself, that's professional marks. And when you see these professional marks, what you have to do and what you have to remember would be bearing in mind that all your answers, especially in section A itself, there must be report format, and then there must be introduction paragraph, and following by the first part of your question. So follow the sequence, the orders. Understand? From the first part, say for example, to the last part, which is part number 4. And we believe that from there, you'll be able to score full marks of 4 as the professional marks in the examination. All right. But it's mainly for section A of the question where you're required to draft a report. All right. And also remember something to do with this. If you get to see anything to do with calculation, all right, so any presentation of the workings, it has to be shown in the appendix right at the back. All right. So that's also another issue where everyone must get to see. Okay. So as a result, now, once again, let me just come back to this. Now, if you're looking at a question like this, you will technically score around 6 marks. All right. So we know that it's like 2 marks for each of the heading. All right. In order for you to answer this question that's to do with the CSF as well as the KPI. And of course, for more, if you wish to see how to answer other parts of the past exam questions with a briefing of the concept, the definition, that it's when we cover that in our revision session. All right. So anyway, now this is what we get to see here. And I hope you enjoy the video. And of course, now we find that by practicing more questions, you would get to know the expectation of the examiner. And do not forget with what I mentioned the other day, it's when you refer to the examiners or we say the exam guidance from the examining team, that's important, as well as by reading technical articles, it helps. All right. So now this is what I've covered and hope to see you again in the next video for our revision session. All right. So anyway, thank you very much and I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you.